So let me hand over to Alex. I met him a couple of weeks ago when I attended one of his presentations at WeWork, and I was really impressed. And I didn't know him before. My friend was Abigail. She was dragging me along and said, "You got to meet this guy." And I sat there, and I was just like, "Wow, he is so awesome." I hope he is tonight. I'm plugging in a great video. He's so good. I really want him to come to the Pony Express stage and share all his secrets with you. Let's see how many of them he will reveal. He's the curator of TEDx Clapham. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Alex Murray.
Thank you very much. After that introduction, I can hardly wait to hear what I've got to say. I'm going to appear a little bit stiff today, and it's because I broke my collarbone a couple of weeks ago. Yes, I was helping an old lady cross. I wasn't. I fell off my bike. But I am on. It's very creaky. I am on a lot of drugs, so it could be the drugs talking if it's bad, or it's me talking if it's good. All right, so bear with me on that. So as Anik said, I curate TEDx Clapham, and my job, I'm a speaker coach, help put people on major stages, work with them to kind of go through that process. Has anyone given a TEDx talk in the audience except for Anik, who's here? Yes. Awesome. Where did you speak at? Warwick Uni? Oh, Woking. Okay, very nice. Awesome. What was your talk on?
Transformation.
Transformation. Very nice. Okay. And how many of you at some point in the future, be it in the next, maybe it's like a New Year's resolution for 2018, or maybe it's you kind of see it in the slightly more distant future. How many of you would like to speak on a TEDx stage in the future? All right, quite a lot. All right, so here's the deal. I'm going to take you through, I'm not going to speak to you today as a speaker coach. I'm going to speak to you as an event curator. For my event, I'm the one who decides which speakers are going to speak. I'm going to give you loads of information on what it takes to get yourself a talk, but not only get yourself a talk, but set yourself up to do it really, really well. Because 5 years ago, if you looked up TEDx and you looked up a talk on there, there's a strong chance it was going to be pretty good. But TEDx has grown a huge amount over the course of the last few years, like phenomenal growth. And I'll talk a little bit about that growth a little bit later. And actually, I'd say if I'm being completely honest, and I hope this doesn't go online because I'm going to get told off, there has been some dilution. There are some amazing talks out there, but there are also there could be some better talks out there. So I want all of you lot to go away today with all the knowledge you need to make sure that you're going to set yourself up to win. So that if you do give a talk and it goes online and it's on their YouTube channel, you've got the opportunity for it to be seen by thousands of people, tens, hundreds, maybe millions. It's a little bit harder to get to the millions, but it's definitely possible. And with the way trends are going at the moment, that is probably what's going to happen. All right, and here's the deal. It's pretty simple. You need two things, and I'm going to major on those two things today. I love it. Pen and paper, ready to go. Check you out. They're well trained. Very good. All right, so let me take you through. How does this work? Can we go that way? Okay. So first question is this. All right. What would you speak about? That's the first question. If I get pitched, probably on average once a day, somebody asks if they can speak at TEDx Clapham. First question I ask them is, what would you like to speak about? Seems like a fairly simple question. Second thing is, why do you want to speak on a major stage? If you can answer those two questions properly, you're going to give yourself a pretty good chance of landing the talk. The problem is that most people screw it up royally. So I'm going to show you where some of those mistakes are made. But before I do that, I would like you to answer both of those questions, right? What would you speak about? And why do you want to speak on a major stage? I'm going to give you 30 seconds. You're going to discuss it with your partner. Off you go. Don't be shy. Crack on. What would you speak about if you're going to speak on a TEDx talk? Hopefully you've thought of a couple of good answers. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to ask you your answers to those questions, and you'll see why in a minute. Let me tell you the most common responses that I get personally, and this is to speak on TEDx Clapham. I can't speak for all the other TEDx organisers across the world, but I can certainly give you my opinions, and you know, I've met lots of organisers. Let me put it that way. So the most common speaker subject I get pitched is what I like to call, are we out? There we go. What I like to call the X Factor story. We all have an X Factor story. The most common pitch I get is, I would love to share my story with other people because I think they'll be able to take something from that that's going to help them. By far the most common pitch talk I get. If anybody says, I can see some guilty faces in the crowd already. If anybody goes to a TEDx organizer and says that, we're probably not going to look at your application any further. And let me tell you the reason why. The reason why is because, well, there are a couple of reasons, right? Everyone's got a story. But the interesting thing, and I totally understand exactly why you do that, because if you all watch TEDx talks, right? Or TED Talks and TEDx, yeah? You've all seen those talks. What we tend to remember is the stories and the people and the stories that they've told on there, right? So we think, okay, so TEDx is actually about sharing stories. But it's not. TEDx is about sharing ideas. Ideas are the commodity you need to come up with, right? And if you make the mistake of saying, I want to share my story, it's not going to go down particularly well, all right? So be very, very aware of that. And there's a second problem as well, right? Everybody's got a story. And if everybody's got a story, then it's not really a differentiator between anybody else. Yes, the story might be different, but ultimately it's a story. And I can probably predict how the story's going to go. It will go something like a chick flick. So the first part of the story, we get to meet you and we like you. We've got to like the characters who are part of the chick flick. I love chick flicks, by the way. It's really important, all right? Then we come across a problem and we build this problem up to be something, you know, really big. And I'm sure there are massive hurdles that people have had to overcome and all of this stuff. And then we turn it around and we say, this is how we've overcome the hurdles, and then everything finishes really, really nicely. That's essentially how most stories tend to go. And the problem is if you follow this route, there's nothing wrong with following this route, but it's about choosing which story you want to share. A great example. Has anyone seen Ken Robinson's talk about schools killing creativity? Put your hands up if you've seen that. All right, loads of you. So it's the most watched TED talk of all time. How much do we know or learn about Ken Robinson from that talk? Can anyone remember any information about Ken? None. His whole talk was based on 3 stories. None of those stories were about him. He was just an onlooker. He was bringing other people into his stories to make them relevant and interesting and let his idea shine, which is that schools are killing creativity. I'm sure you've all seen the one with Simon Sinek, Start With Why, the golden circle, like massive if you're looking to construct a talk, exactly the same. But how much do we know about Simon? Hardly anything. Amy Cuddy, a massive one for speakers. Again, it's really interesting, like the theme of communication coming up for some of the most popular talks. How much do we know about Amy? Very little. She's demonstrating and showing the research that she's got to help people improve their communication and all of that stuff. So stories aren't relevant, ideas are. All right? There's something else I want you to think about here, and I don't want it to come across as harsh. I'm just trying to give you stuff that helps. So I am going to be the angry guy today, Anik, all right? That is, it doesn't take, I'm trying to think of a really nice way to put it. It's easy to comment on something that's already happened, but very, very difficult to talk about something that doesn't yet exist, right? It doesn't take a vast amount of brain power to be able to tell a story that you've experienced and been with before. But to create something that you've got to really think and put together, that's kind of what organisers are looking for. We're looking for something that's going to teach us something completely new. So if you ever apply to speak at a major event, because I'm not just here to talk about TEDx, I help people land other major talks too. The common theme is this: unless your story is outrageously exceptional, it's probably not the right thing to be focusing on as the major part of your talk. It might form a part of your talk, but it's never going to be the major thing. All right? Second pitfall, if you like, when it comes to applications. You'll get people who'll be like, well, I have this amazing talk that goes down really, really well every time I get up on stage and speak. I think it would be great for TEDx audience members that I've delivered this talk to reckon this would be amazing to have on a TEDx stage. It needs to be heard and all of that stuff. Now, let's flip that round and think about the TEDx organizers. So TEDx organizers don't make any money from running these TEDx events. They're financially liable for them, in fact. Do we want second-hand goods? Because that is ultimately what they are. Absolutely not. We want something that is brand new, that people have never heard before. Because if you can get that right and you can get the subject right, when those talks go online, they've got way more chance to be seen by loads of people, right? And for some really exciting things to happen through. So never come to us with something that, or at least don't tell us, right? You may have delivered parts of your talk before, but don't tell us that you have. Come to us with something that we've never heard before, and it is going to have a way bigger chance of getting you through at least to the next round or interview stage or whatever. And then there's one more. I call this the Matrix. And the Matrix one is when you may well have been in these situations if you put events together. It's, so what would you like to speak about? Well, I can speak about whatever you want me to speak about. What would you like me to speak about? I can speak about anything. Big, big no-no. I am looking for experts. Experts only. I'm only looking for experts that are going to come and speak on my stage. All right? So if you're telling me that you can speak about absolutely everything, you're telling me I'm going to make a couple of assumptions about you. Right or wrong, I'm probably going to make a couple of assumptions. One, that you will never talk about the subjects that you end up speaking about in enough depth for it to be really interesting to the audience members. And two, it's likely in that case that you don't understand what you're talking about well enough for it to be worthy of a TEDx talk. All right, so be really, really specific about the things that you want to share and the findings that you've got. And if you can do that and say, actually, I don't talk about that stuff, I don't know about that, it's going to make a really it'll make a really monumental difference to how your application's received. I have this thing, I like to call it the expert test, something I sort of made up in my head. But I have this theory that experts are people who have an understanding of how much they don't know as opposed to how much they do. Often, when we go into a job interview or whatever it might be, we're there trying to convince people how much we know about stuff, when actually a real marker of somebody who's got a good grasp of their subject is, well, they're like, actually, there's so much I don't know. Imagine what David Attenborough would say. David Attenborough, if you asked him how much he knew about the natural world, he'd probably say very, very little. I bet he would, because he's got a grasp of how little really, even though he's got more knowledge than everybody else in that subject, he's got a grasp as to how much there is that he doesn't know and how much people don't know. And that is far more enticing for me than somebody who thinks they know absolutely everything. So when it comes to answering that question, what is it that you want to speak about, that is like the first hurdle. And though the question probably won't be phrased like that if you look at a TEDx application, for example, it'll probably be phrased, what is the idea that you would like to share? Something like that. All right? Caveat, I'm only speaking about my event, not events around the world, but I'm kind of speaking about them too. All right. So why do you want to speak on a major stage? Really important question for us. It's a competitive, in theory, it's a difficult stage to come and stand on. So we're looking for people who are going to take that opportunity and use it for the right reasons, okay? So we're not stupid. We know that it is an incredible platform that can help you share a message to thousands of people. Exposure is going to be a reason why you want to give a talk, right? That's okay. I totally get it. But it doesn't sound very good in an application where when you're kind of saying, well, I want to get my message out to absolutely everybody. Like, believe it or not, that's something that we get a lot when we ask that question. Second thing, a lot of you might fancy, how many of you are like, how your businesses are maybe under 5 years old? Put your hands up. Okay, so we've got quite a few. Right, same, me too. And here's the thing, when you've got a young business, you've got to hustle so hard. It's so hard when you're running your own business. And what's likely is that business owners will want to use brands like TED and TEDx to piggyback off, because suddenly, if you're seen to be associated with that beautiful sign that is known across the world by millions of people, you are suddenly putting yourself in a situation where people feel like they can trust you. And that, when you're starting a business, when you're growing your business, when you don't have loads of clients and testimonials and all of that stuff, can be incredibly powerful. Please don't put it in your application. Last one, bottom line, monies. The opportunities that can come through speaking at one of these events are big. One of the guys who's spoken at my event is talking about a £300 million deal. His talk's been seen by 500 people. Tiny numbers, but big money, big opportunities, and all of that stuff can come through from it. But that is not a reason why that you can bring to the table as to why you want to speak about that. And if you don't talk about any of those reasons, there's a strong chance you will, there we go. There's a strong chance you'll be talking about the fact that you want to inspire others. You want to motivate others. I was in New York for an organizers conference 3 or 4 months ago, and I was chatting to the guy who's essentially my boss from the TEDx side of things. And we were talking about this misconception of motivation and inspiration. You use either of those two words in an application, your application will get bent. Crazy, right? But why is that the case when you watch a TEDx talk or a TED talk, you're feeling pretty good afterwards, feeling pretty motivated? Well, here's my theory, and it's just a theory. It's what I've kind of pieced together in my head. I think that inspiration and motivation are kind of like a paradox, all right? If you set out to motivate and inspire, there is a strong chance you will fail at doing so. Let me tell you why. I think that we mistake this feeling of inspiration for learning something new. As adults, we don't learn that much anymore. We've forgotten what it feels like to learn something new. It's much harder to inspire somebody who is at school 8:30 till 3:30 or whatever the times are, learning something every single day. But when you learn something that's kind of given you this light bulb moment and you can think of all the possibilities, now you know this piece of information, it feels pretty good, it feels pretty motivating. But actually, the bottom line is you've probably just learned something that you didn't know before. All right, so really try and think about that as a principle. Set out to educate and you will inspire. Set out to inspire and you probably won't. So don't come along with, I want to inspire other people, because guess what? Everybody else comes up with that too, because they want to sound nice and good and they're doing something good for the world, blah, 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 blah. All right. So there's a common theme here, and that common theme essentially is all of the reasons for giving a talk, all of the talks that you perhaps want to do. Often where most people fail is that they're all about them. It's very, very self-centered. And one of the things that I'm sure going through with Anik, that for those of you who are part of the Speaking Accelerator and all of that, one of the things that you will have learned is that you are not important when you are stood on stage. The only people that matter are your audience, right? Your audience has to come first. If you don't put your audience first, you're not going to be of any use to anybody at all. And here's the thing, there are 3 ways you can kind of go when you choose to write your talk or decide what your talk concepts and all of that stuff's going to be. First one is you can talk about what you think people want to hear. That's number 1. You can go down that route. Secondly, you can talk about what you think your audience... drugs. I'm going to go with drugs. Secondly, you can talk about what your audience wants to hear. And then thirdly, you can talk about what your audience needs to hear. I think actually you're better off talking about what your audience needs to hear. So have a think about what your audience, what is it that they need to hear? They don't have to like necessarily what you're going to say. You guys probably are like, wow, this is a really grumpy TEDx organizer. It's just telling me about all the bad things that people are doing, and hopefully I'll turn it around a little bit. You will find out. But the point is this, there are so many, people make mistakes so quickly and so early on in their applications, and they're wasting their opportunities, and it really shouldn't be like that. That's why I'm kind of majoring down on some of the mistakes that are being made. So really think about what your audience needs to hear. when you're looking at speaking at a major event, I think the real key is you've got to think way, way bigger than yourself, way bigger than your audience. You need to think about things on a big scale. It doesn't necessarily have to be global, but I think it's got to be pretty close to global. Let me tell you why. In fact, before I tell you why, I want to talk to you about this guy. And this guy really represents, 10 minutes, shit. This guy basically represents everything that so many people who apply and fail to land these gigs could potentially go on to do. It took him 18 months to land his TEDx talk. 18 months. He applied to 25 different events, and trust me, the application process sometimes can be really long and wordy and all of this stuff. When his talk went online, he's on like 1.7 million views now. He's in the top 5 most watched TEDx talks of 2016. He's got 3 booked out deals on the table. He bought a house last year. All these amazing things have come through, and he wanted to do the talk because he's a fitness coach and a model, as I'm sure you ladies can tell. And he wanted to have something out there, a piece of thought leadership that was going to separate him from absolutely everybody else. So the point is, you could be like Roger Frampton, have some amazing ideas, but unless you can communicate that in your applications, it's going to be really, really hard to convince people to land your talk. All right, so think very, very carefully about what goes into your applications. Let me give you some insights really quickly. This is me at TED Fest a few months ago. TEDx has been going for the last 9 years. In February, they reached the 1 billion view mark. By December this year, they will have reached 2 billion views. That is exponential growth. That is ridiculous. That means there's a real opportunity there. And all of the reasons why I said you shouldn't be giving a talk, actually, they're reasons, absolute reasons why you should. But there's got to be something alongside that is there for the greater good. One of the things that really stuck in my mind when listening to the curator of TEDx, the whole thing, was that they see TED as a philanthropy organization, right? It's about doing good things for the world. They have like this amazing scholarship. They are doing a lot of good things behind the scenes with the £10,000 it costs to attend one of the events as an attendee. So let me take you through what you can do and some of the questions you need to really go away and think about answering, so that if and when you feel the time is right to apply, you're going to give yourself a really good chance of making it through. Sound good? All right. First thing you need is a legacy. It's more important than anything. If you've got a legacy, you're going to put yourself in a great place, all right? History has proven time and time again that speeches can change the world. We need to look no further than this guy, Martin Luther King. He had a legacy, right? Racial equality is the legacy that he's trying to work towards. But he also had an idea, right? That black people and white people could be treated equally. That was essentially the idea that he was bringing to the table. Emma Watson, more recently, has driven this incredible feminism movement over the course of the last few years, which was introduced by a speech that she did at the UN for the He for She campaign. She brought a new take to feminism that people hadn't seen before. She was placing men at the forefront of that movement. No one had seen that before. No one had heard of that before. And you start to see like men with feminist written in their Twitter profile. Like, that's pretty powerful. That's where things start to change. These are good feelings, right? So you need to think about what your legacy is going to be. How will your talk serve a bigger purpose? If you can answer that question, and if you put I in the answer to that, you've got it all wrong, right? It's all about everybody else. It's nothing to do with you. So let me tell you where you can start to think about and how you can start to communicate that legacy. I think there are 3 levels of legacy that you can help to create. The first one is to educate. Goes in line with what I was saying before. If you're not educating people when you speak, you're probably not giving them anything of value at all. So please make sure that you're teaching people something new. The step up from that is to change something. And there are 2 things you can really change. Perception, right? Opinion, stuff that goes on in here. Or you can change behavior. And if you're then going down that route, a step further than that, and this is the hardest one of all to do, is to build. So let me give you 3 examples of people who've landed talks at TEDx Clapham, and I'll tell you how they pitched them. Izzy came up to me, friend of a friend, which does help sometimes, but it didn't help with me at that particular time, I promise. She was like, it's fine, we got it. She goes, Alex, I'd love to be considered for your TEDx event. I was like, sweet, what do you speak about? She was like, well, why do you want to give a talk? I want to change the perception of sexual assault. Full stop. I'm there like, sounds good, count me in. I want to be part of that. As an organizer, if I give a platform to someone who's looking to change the perception of sexual assault, that makes me feel pretty good on a really selfish level, but we're also doing something really good. 2.5 years later, she calls me and says, legislation is changing, we've done it. That is awesome. Her talk's been seen like 2,000 times, it's nothing. But big things have happened from that talk. Gemma Milne. Why do you want to speak at TEDx Clapham? I want to make science more accessible. Boom. I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but I asked her. It was enough for me to be like, what do you mean? She was like, tech has suddenly got really cool, used to be really geeky. Science needs to go on the same journey because science is still geeky. And the way we can do that is by making papers accessible. We can get them out to people. Some guy in another country saw her talk and set up a business based on that. He's found a legal loophole to get papers that were previously private out to other people. Edwina Thompson. I mean, if anyone was going to be able to talk about their story, she probably could. She was held captive and held to ransom in Afghanistan. She's like probably one of the, possibly the most, she spent the longest time as a civilian out in Afghanistan during the war. Got held to ransom, all of this stuff. She was like, I need to do a TEDx talk because I've got meetings with the governments in several European countries and the UN in the next 2 or 3 months. I want to use the talk as a precursor to the meeting. I'm thinking, seems like a pretty good reason for me, right? And think about how powerful that stuff can be for you. If you're getting a big message out there, you've got a big mission, using that talk as a precursor to put it in front of the people that need to hear your message, that's where change and all of these things can happen. So think about what you want your talk to change. Step 2. So when you've got your legacy intact, you've got to develop your idea. You need 3 things. And some of you may have seen this before. Does anyone know who the guy in the middle is? Aristotle. Spot on. Right? He reckons you need 3 things to be able to put together a persuasive argument. First one, pathos. Pathos is where we get the word passion from. Sounds cheesy. Speak about things that you're passionate about. Communication is a transference of feelings. It's so, so important. Sounds cheesy, but it's true. Right? So you've got to be talking about something that you could bite your friend's ear off with if they gave you half the opportunity to. Second thing, ethos. Ethos is all about credibility and character. Right? Why are you the right person to be talking about your subject? And you can go down 2 routes, professional experience, personal experience. Why are you the right person to be talking about your subject? There was a girl who I worked with who wanted to talk about making the workplace more fun. I was like, what gives you the right to talk about that? And she said, I've been a clown for 10 years. Makes sense. Yeah. Something a little bit different. And then the third thing, logos. The most important thing for me. TEDx talks aren't about these amazing speakers who stand on stage and memorize everything and make everything look easy. The videos have been cut to make it look like that. People who stand on the big TED stage forget their lines, like lose their shit, like all of that stuff happens. It's normal. So don't worry about it. They'll cut it out. That's the brutal reality. Okay? But logos is the most important thing. It's where we get logic from. And it's the substance, it's the research, it's the theories, it's the idea. It's the thing that you're going to be talking about. It's the juice. Stories can go around the juice. And that's how you can start putting all these different components together. If you can get that right, you're going to achieve something really special. And here, we are so on time. And here are a few ideas that I've helped to put on the stage to give you an idea. And Something that you might find quite interesting and useful is a lot of people mistake the title of a talk for the idea itself, and that's often not the case. The title, the only purpose of a talk title, which is what you'll see on YouTube, is to attract people to click on the link, all right? So don't put your title as your idea. You've got to think about what the idea is. And a really great example, because you've all seen the talk, is Simon Sinek, right? His talk was about how leaders inspire action. That was the clickbait. His message was start with why. 3 things your idea needs to have. It needs to educate an audience. It needs to solve a problem. And last but not least, it needs to create a legacy. If you can put all these 3 things in place, you are going to put yourself in an amazing position. And while I've probably sounded like a teacher tonight, I'm very sorry for that. I just want you to think about how you can communicate your ideas in the right way, so you're not wasting time sending out applications and getting the wrong idea about these major events. Event organizers want people on stage that are going to create major change, because that's what makes us feel good. Thank you very much.